regarding the single agenda item for tonight. We can't undertake extended discussion on non-agendized items.
This past Thursday, the City Council held a special meeting at the wastewater treatment plant regarding the signing of an amicus brief that would be filed in conjunction with a petition for the case of Martin V Boise to be heard by the Supreme Court. The brief was the only item on the agenda for this meeting. For nearly a year, the city of Crescent City has struggled to understand the implications of Martin v. Boise, a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling that states that homeless people cannot be moved from public land if there is no alternative shelter for them.
Hi, Mayor. Kevin Bingham here again. I just wanted to say it just made me feel so proud of all of you for bringing this to the table. And I lived here a long time. I don't know if I've ever seen a meeting called this quickly, except for a tsunami.
With a filing deadline looming for the amicus, the City Council decided to hold this special meeting to give the public a chance to both learn about and comment on the brief's implications. By signing the amicus, the city would agree to share the legal fees for the brief's filing with the upwards of 25 other communities that have signed on thus far. The brief is being filed by Rennie Public Law Group, a San Francisco law firm that specializes in municipal law. According to City Attorney Martha Rice, the cost to the city would not exceed $5,000. One public commenter questioned the wisdom of spending any money in what he sees as an attempt to overturn Martin v. Boise.
This lawsuit will be going forward regardless of whether Crescent City has any input into it or not. I don't know what the budget is for legal services for the city of Crescent City, but I can imagine that $5,000 is not a trivial amount of money. And so why California's taxpayer dollars should be put into supporting the city of Boise is a bit of a mystery for me. Perhaps that $5,000 could be put into dealing with our situation here locally, since that's what affects this community.
According to Rice, the city's intention in signing the brief is to join the coalition of communities seeking clarification of Martin v. Boise.
It raises a lot of questions and uncertainties which make it difficult to regulate. So a lot of ancillary activities that we deal with constantly regarding trash and public urination or defecation and environmental hazards and various different things, how there's really just a lot of questions about what this case means. Not only that, but also just as far as how can it be regulated, when can it be regulated, what's adequate shelter, what's not adequate shelter, all of those questions that we have, and the fact that in order to continue this forward and get a good picture of what's allowed under the law will require a lot of expensive and protracted litigation.
Many in attendance voiced concern over what they perceive as a deterioration in public health and safety brought about by the increased numbers of homeless camping on public land, a perception shared by Councilmember Jason Greenow.
This comes down to the fact that this case has really harmed our community. And it's harmed our community in that it has taken our policing ability away as a city and as a county to regulate behaviors that we as a city and as a county ought to be regulating. And I'm not okay with that.
But others in attendance questioned the true intention in signing a brief that could potentially overturn Martin v. Boise.
What Martin v. Boise did was take a problem that everyone knew existed and give it a venue and a vehicle for it to come out of the shadows and actually be seen. So it seems to me that the real effort should be how do we address these issues that we all know exist as compared to focusing on this narrow thing of how, and I'm not trying to say this in a disparaging way, okay? How, instead of focusing on how can we get these people back out of sight? Because some people don't want to see them. Yes, you don't want to see them, I get it, but they still exist.
Local teacher and city council member Isaiah Wright addressed these concerns and disagreed with this characterization of the amicus.
I'm a school teacher, as most of you guys know, and forget about being beholden to the people that put me here. I gotta face my children every day, my students, that is. Every day I tell them, you know, we have to be good neighbors, you have to help people. When I read through this, I did not get, we're trying to push people back into the forest. I got, we want clarification. I could not teach how I teach to my students, trying to teach them to be, like I said, good citizens, better people, and truly support something that would say, no, screw the homeless people, get them out of here, we don't want to help them. No, that's not what I got from this at all. And I will be able to go to my students tomorrow because I talk to them about every meeting that I ever have, and I'll be able to tell them this is what we're doing, and then I'll, like I always do, make a writing prompt about it, and they're going to tell me what they think about it. They tried to come up with some issues, some solutions to it last time, and I'm sure someone's going to come up with great ideas this time.
Would you please pull the vote?
Councilmember Greeno?
Yes.
Councilmember Fallman?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Kine?
Yes.
And Mayor Inscore.
Yes, very good. That is our only agendized item. I appreciate very much you guys coming tonight and participating.
Thank you.
We're adjourned till Monday, October 7th.
After the City Council's unanimous vote to sign the amicus brief, we spoke to Mayor Blake Inscore. So, regarding the meeting tonight, how are the plans to implement a shelter in Delaware affected by this decision?
I don't think that it has anything to do with trying to put together a shelter. I mean, what we're talking about is getting clarity from the Supreme Court on what does the Ninth Circuit Court ruling mean and how do we apply that ruling day in and day out. The reality is we do need a shelter here. I think that everybody on the City Council understands that and supports that and have been at the table with the county who is responsible for basically providing those services, is saying what's our role to play. But it doesn't have anything to do with that need. That's clearly an important need that we need to keep working towards.
I think, could this money or other money not be used to support local shelters like the new branch of Our Daily Bread that she's expanding?
I think that you could say that you could just take the money and say, well, if you use this $5,000 for that, would that be better? I think the reality is money needs to be allocated for that. And that's not a question. But allocating money to address something that we know will continue to be an ongoing problem is also a good allocation of funds. Because the reality is even if the shelter is opened up at the new Our Daily Bread, and I really hope it is, there's still going to be questions about those who refuse to use the shelter, but we have to figure out how do we respond to these people. And so it's two paths that I think are both worthy of our funding. So I just separate the two and say we need to be investing in both.
Could you give a specific example of some of the ambiguities that you say the decision by the Ninth Circuit Court created? Like in a situation, what sort of ambiguities are you looking to kind of get rid of?
I think that the focus on sleeping and resting. When does sleeping and resting become camping? So if a person is without shelter, doesn't have a home, and they're on public land and they need to rest or they need to sleep, when is sleeping and resting something that's a single event? And when does it just become camping or becoming their de facto place of residence? And I don't think that is clearly spelled out. And if we can't criminalize the sleeping and resting, then we need a clearer definition of what that means. The city has a no camping ordinance in place, which we're really struggling to say, well, can we enforce that in view of the Ninth Circuit Court ruling? Because if you and I, who have a place to sleep tonight, if we decided that we wanted to go get a tent and set up and camp in Beachfront Park with some of our friends, we wouldn't be allowed to do that. And that's the kind of ambiguity that I think we need to tighten up this language and make sure that we know how to appropriately address all of these concerns.
For KFUG Community News, I'm Avi Critz.